The moment I knew they'd already made their decision was when they asked me to explain my emotional tone in last week's reply. Not the contents of the email, not the data I flagged, just the tone. As if the real issue wasn't that a driver nearly lost his leg, but that I hadn't used enough exclamation points when I called it unacceptable. I sat there in that glass conference room, the one always kept just a little too cold, watching my boss slide a single sheet of paper across the table. My words printed in black and white with one sentence highlighted: "We need to stop burying internal safety flags just to hit fulfillment goals." That was what they chose to hold against me. My name is Malcolm Reeves. I'm 51 years old. I've spent the last 23 years in compliance, the last 17 of those with the same logistics company. Regional Director for the Midwest Zone. Oversight of 7 states, over 120 sites, hundreds of drivers, dozens of safety incidents investigated. Some preventable, some not, all documented, or at least they used to be. That Thursday morning in November at 8:46 a.m. I stopped being part of the team and started being managed out. They just hadn't said it yet. I remember the way my boss folded his hands after sliding that paper to me. Not aggressively, not even cold, just methodically. Like this was a routine checkup, not a conversation that would unravel everything I'd spent 2 decades building. He asked, "Would you say this reflects the tone we expect across leadership channels?" I looked at the sentence again. We need to stop burying internal safety flags. It didn't feel aggressive to me. It felt responsible. Urgent, even. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't accuse. I stated a fact that had been true for years but had suddenly become out of alignment with leadership expectations. I didn't answer his question. I asked one instead. Are we investigating the report or the tone of the report? He smiled a little. A practice smile, like the ones you learn from executive training decks about navigating conflict. He said, "We're just trying to understand how you see your role evolving." That's when I knew. This wasn't about tone. It wasn't even about that incident report. It was about me being seen as something inconvenient. Outdated, hard to shape, harder to silence. I sat with that for a long time after the meeting ended. I went back to my office, shut the door, and stared at the wall where I kept all the regional maps pinned. I'd built those routes from scratch, knew which warehouses flooded when it rained too hard, knew which regional leads needed 2 phone calls before they'd admit something went wrong, knew the names of 3 drivers' kids who'd come by the office during holiday runs. I wasn't the kind of leader they liked to post about on LinkedIn. I didn't give keynotes. I didn't write thought leadership threads. I wrote protocols, checklists, real things. And now they were telling me the problem was how I sounded, not what I said, not what happened, just how I made them feel when I said it. That weekend I didn't go anywhere. I didn't return texts. I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow pad and started writing names. Incidents, flags, words I remembered changing in reports that used to read critical but were later downgraded to advisory. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about memory, mine, theirs. And what gets lost when the only people allowed to speak are the ones who've never had to clean up the damage. Monday morning I logged in like normal. Said good morning to Donna at reception. Took the stairs even though the elevator was working again. Sat at my desk and opened my inbox. 3 meeting invites had disappeared. The quarterly audit prep call was reassigned. My access to the shared safety folder was revoked. The incident queue had been restructured and now required executive-level review before anything moved to documentation. I knew that pattern. You don't fire people like me overnight. You cut them loose piece by piece, so by the time the package arrives, you've already emptied the room. But I hadn't disappeared yet, so I printed everything, every report I'd filed, every email chain, every slide deck where I was told to adjust narrative severity. I bought a scanner, carried it in from my trunk, set it up at home next to my coffee pot. I began each morning with a pot of black coffee and 4 hours of scanning, chronological, labeled, indexed. I don't know what I was building at first. A Record A shield. A way to say I was here. I told the truth, maybe all of it. By December, I had 9 binders, each one filled with a different year's worth of documents, each one proof that they hadn't silenced me, just ignored me. One night I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Valerie. She was the wife of Marcus D., one of our drivers, the one who died in a rollover near Cincinnati. She said, "I heard you got pushed out." I didn't correct her. She said, "I still have that voicemail. The one you left me the night it happened." Her voice broke. "You were the only one who didn't try to make it sound clean." I closed my eyes. I remembered that night, driving out to the hospital even though I wasn't supposed to, sitting in my car while it rained and practicing what I was going to say, then saying none of it and just letting her cry. Now she was crying again, but quieter. I said, "Thank you for saying that." She said, "If you ever need someone to say what really happened, I will." Then she hung up, and I sat in the dark with that voicemail playing again in my memory. Not loud, not angry, just real. That call from Valerie did something to me. Not like a switch, more like a settling. Like confirmation that I hadn't imagined the weight of what I'd carried all those years. That I hadn't made the stakes up. That someone outside the building remembered not just the loss, but the way I responded to it. I started going back over old memos after that, the ones I never sent, the drafts I saved but left in the folder called Notes, internal use only. Some of them were angry, others were just sad. The kind of sadness that doesn't show up in HR reports but lives under your skin for years. There was one dated July 14th, 2 years ago, 5:03 p.m. I'd written, "We are one missed stoplight from a preventable headline." I never sent it, I just closed the tab. Because back then I still thought keeping my job meant biting my tongue. Now I wasn't so sure. I kept showing up to work even as they cut around me. Access revoked, calendars scrubbed. My name disappeared from update chains. The team started getting rerouted to my junior, a bright kid, good instincts, but scared. I could see it in his eyes. He avoided mine. Not because he didn't respect me, because he didn't know if it was safe to. They assigned an internal process audit, said it was standard, brought in an outside consultant. Funny thing was that consultant had once sat in a training I'd led. Back then he'd taken notes. This time he didn't say much, just followed me around the floor, clipboard in hand, nodding as if he hadn't already been given his conclusion. He sent his report straight to corporate. I never saw a copy, but I knew the drill. They weren't collecting insight. They were collecting distance. They needed a file they could point to when it was time to say we did our due diligence. They needed a paper trail that ended with me being called uncooperative, defensive, not aligned. I didn't fight it, I watched. I documented everything, every sudden calendar change, every request I made that was marked pending and never answered, every file I was locked out of, every policy update that didn't go through legal, every time someone forgot to invite me to a call about a case I'd opened. I saved Slack threads, took screenshots, not because I was planning to sue, because I needed to know I wasn't crazy. You'd be surprised how many professionals live in that space where the slow gaslight of silence makes you question the very foundation of your work. By January, I knew I wouldn't make it to spring, but I didn't feel fear. I felt empty. Not the kind of empty that comes from loss, the kind that comes from being used up, like a dry well. I took a week of PTO in February, told them I needed to regroup. I spent the entire time cataloging, building something I didn't name. I scanned files for 7 hours a day, reread every audit I'd ever signed off on, cross-referenced changes, highlighted discrepancies. There were 47 cases over 9 years where a flagged safety concern had been downgraded, delayed, or disappeared altogether after submission. Most of the time it was small language, critical became advisory. Systemic became site-specific. But the effect was always the same. The paper looked cleaner than the floor it was supposed to represent. In 13 of those cases, someone got hurt. 2 required hospitalizations, 1 resulted in death Marcus, and now I had the trail. I met with a labor attorney. Quiet office, gray carpet. He asked if I was trying to sue. I said no. He asked if I wanted to settle. I said I didn't want anything. He looked confused. I told him I just wanted to preserve the truth. He leaned back and nodded slowly. Said, "That's rare." I didn't say anything back. I didn't need to. He helped me draft a packet. One that could be submitted to the Department of Labor if necessary. Another version simplified for an investigative journalist if it ever came to that. And one more for me. The version with everything. Every note, every flag, every name. By March, I had a shelf full of truth, and no one knew but me. That month, the company rolled out a national safety initiative. Internal videos, new posters, a branded hashtag Drive Safe Deliver Strong. Corporate sent us boxes of merch, tote bags, reflective armbands, pens shaped like seatbelts. The irony almost made me laugh. Then I saw the memo. They were sending the new head of compliance, the same one who'd signed off on my transition plan, to speak at the National Logistics Safety Conference in Denver. Keynote speaker. The topic: proactive accountability in fleet culture. I closed my laptop, walked out to the porch, and stared at the horizon until the sky turned orange. That night I opened my file, the one labeled Final. I printed it, bound it, slipped it in a padded envelope. I didn't send it to the press. I didn't leak it to the labor board. I sent it to Valerie, just one copy. With a note. You always said you'd speak if someone needed the truth. I'm asking. I didn't hear anything for a week, not from Valerie, not from the company. The air was still, like the moment before a summer storm where the trees go quiet and the birds vanish. Then on a Wednesday afternoon, while I was scraping ice off my windshield outside the compliance annex, I got a call. Unknown number, New York area code. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was calm. Clear. Mr. Reeves, I'm calling from the Office of Transportation Oversight. Your name came up as part of a flagged inquiry into multiple Class 3 safety discrepancies across the Midwest corridor. She said flagged, but I knew what that meant. Valerie had opened it. I didn't say much. Just confirmed my identity, said I was willing to speak, and asked for it in writing. She sent the follow-up email less than 5 minutes later. I forwarded it to my attorney. Then I closed the laptop, sat back in the chair I'd had since 2011, the one with the cracked leather armrests and the broken recline lever, and I exhaled. Not because I felt safe, because I didn't have to hold the weight by myself anymore. A day later, a journalist I didn't recognize emailed me, said she'd spoken to Valerie's legal rep, said she had documentation that raised serious public concern. She asked if I wanted to go on the record. I said no. She asked if I'd review her draft before it published. I said yes. When I opened the draft, I felt my chest tighten. There it was, in print, for the first time. Not buried in footnotes, not hidden in policy reports, just their names, dates, data points. Numbers I'd been told to make smaller, phrases I'd been told to soften, all of it returned to full volume. And then the part that hit me hardest when contacted for comment. The company stated that Mr. Reeves' departure had been unrelated to any compliance findings and declined further response. There it was, the lie, out in the open, and I didn't have to answer it. Not anymore. Because the story wasn't mine now. It belonged to the people who'd been erased, not just Marcus, not just the drivers, but the analysts, the warehouse staff, the junior leads who had whispered about risk but been told to reframe the narrative. The article went live on a Friday. Quiet headline, black and white, no dramatics, but it spread. Within hours, 3 regional labor offices opened case reviews. A Senate subcommittee chair retweeted it with the words, "This is why enforcement matters." I stayed quiet. No press, no podcast interviews, no dramatic op-ed, just silence. And then they reached out. Not corporate, not legal. Nate, the same junior lead they'd installed to shadow my role. He sent a message to my personal email. Subject line, "Can we talk?" He said he hadn't known, that no one told him, that he'd been instructed to observe and learn. He apologized, not in that vague corporate way. A real apology. He wrote, "You were trying to protect us. I'm sorry I didn't understand until now." I didn't write back. Not because I didn't forgive him, because there was nothing left to say. He'd seen it now. That was enough. A week later, I turned in my badge. I wasn't technically employed anymore. They'd moved me to project status, a kind of professional purgatory that allowed them to delay severance while still claiming I hadn't been terminated. But I didn't care. I dropped the badge in a manila envelope, wrote my name on it, left it at the front desk with Donna, who gave me a long look before saying, "They're not going to recover from this, are they?" I just said they'll recover, but maybe next time they'll remember what it costs. She nodded, and I walked out. It wasn't a movie ending. No applause, no final confrontation in the rain. Just a gray sky, a half-full parking lot, and a man walking away without needing to burn anything down. Because I'd already done what they didn't think I could do, I outlasted them, not with anger, with truth. After I walked out, there was no parade, no inbox full of congratulations, no viral story where I got to be the hero in the end. That's not how it works when you tell the truth quietly. when you build something in silence and hand it over without asking for anything back. Instead, the phone just stopped ringing. I turned in my company phone, bought a new one, a cheap one. No synced calendars, no Slack notifications, no preloaded email accounts. Just a number. Something that rang when a real person needed me, not when a system decided I owed it more time. I didn't apply for new jobs right away. I didn't polish my resume or hire a PR firm. I let myself disappear for a while, on purpose. There's a strange kind of grief in walking away from something that once defined you. Not because it was good, but because it was familiar. For 23 years, I was the guy who fixed things before they broke. The one who read the fine print, who showed up early to meetings and left late without ever being asked to, who didn't take credit unless someone else was being left out. That's the man they said wasn't a culture fit anymore. Now my days were quieter. I woke up at 7, still couldn't sleep in, made coffee black. Sat by the window and let the steam rise through the light. I walked the park trail near the lake most mornings. Past the same people every day, an older woman with a red windbreaker, a teenager who always jogged alone, a man in a business suit with earbuds and tired eyes. None of them knew what I had done, what I had carried, what I had let go. And I liked it that way. Some afternoons I found myself organizing old papers, not for evidence, just for closure. I'd open a folder and remember the moment it was created, the voice on the other end of the line, the tone, the hesitation, the moment someone trusted me enough to tell the truth even when they knew it wouldn't be popular. I saved those things, still do, not as trophies, as reminders, that ethics isn't a performance, it's a posture. About a month after I left, Eric called. He used to work under me before jumping ship to a small logistics firm on the East Coast. He'd read the article, said I knew something was off when they started pushing you out. I asked how he was doing. He said, "We're expanding. Thought maybe you'd want to help, not full-time, just advisory. No decks, no politics." I said I'd think about it. And I did. For a week I sat with that offer. I knew I could help. I knew I still had something to give, but I also knew I couldn't walk back into anything that looked like what I left. I couldn't be the man who took on everyone else's silence and drowned in it again. So I called him back, said yes, but on my terms. I'd work 3 days a week, no more. I'd mentor, review policy, help design safer systems, but I wouldn't be responsible for fixing their soul. That had to come from the inside. He agreed. No pushback. That was the first time in years I felt what the word integrity really meant, not just holding the line, but being whole, choosing what to give and what to keep for yourself. And then slowly people started reaching out, not the ones you'd expect, not executives, drivers, warehouse floor supervisors, the kind of people who keep operations moving but rarely make it into PowerPoints. They found my number, asked if I could take a quick call, wanted to know how I knew when it was time to speak, wanted to know what to do with what they were seeing. I didn't give advice. I listened, and when they were done, I told them what I'd told myself quietly for years. You're not crazy. You're just seeing things clearly in a place that's built to make you doubt that. That sentence alone, sometimes that's enough. Not a solution, just a light left on in the hallway. It's been over a year now. My story came and went in the news cycle. The article's still up, buried behind fresher scandals and louder failures. But every so often someone still finds it. Someone tired. Someone questioning their own silence. They reach out, briefly, quietly. Sometimes all they write is, "I didn't know anyone else felt this way." And I write back if I can. Usually just one line. "You're not alone. I've come to understand that you don't need to burn down the building to reclaim your name. Sometimes you just have to walk out with your dignity intact and let the silence inside speak for itself." The company never acknowledged what happened. No press conference, no formal apology, just a reorg, a few name changes, some policies rebranded with language I once wrote in the margins of memos no one wanted to read. That used to bother me. Now I take it as confirmation. Truth doesn't need credit, it just needs air. Valerie and I spoke once since then. She sent a card with a handwritten note. "Thank you for giving me something to believe in again." That's all it said. But it was more than enough. I don't work full-time anymore. I advise, I listen, I help build things that last longer than the people who take credit for them. Most days I spend with people who don't need to be reminded why this work matters. They already know. They've lived it. And they're tired of pretending the numbers matter more than the lives behind them. I keep the file locked in a drawer now, not to protect myself, but because I don't need it anymore. I didn't save the company, I didn't ruin it either. I just told the truth and stepped away before it crushed the last piece of me that still believed in the work. Some days I walk the trail by the lake and think about all the years I spent trying to be the kind of leader they'd respect. The kind who made the room comfortable, who rounded off his edges to fit the culture. And then I remember the most dangerous kind of man is the one who's already lost everything but his name and still won't lie to keep the rest. That's who I became. Not out of bravery. Out of necessity, because when they stripped away the title, the role, the access, the meetings, all that was left was me. And I wasn't angry. I wasn't even bitter. I was free. So if you're listening to this and the walls are starting to close in, if you've been asked to reframe what you know is real, if you've been told your tone is the problem when the problem is much deeper, I hope you'll hear me clearly. You are not difficult. You are not unfit. You are not broken. You are simply awake in a system that profits from your doubt. And if they try to erase you, let them try. But build your truth in the quiet while they're looking away. They won't see it coming. And when it arrives, it won't roar. It'll arrive like a file in a drawer. A name they can't scrub out. A record they can't explain. A silence they can't outrun. If this story felt familiar, I hope you know you're not alone. I don't tell it for attention. I tell it so the next man doesn't think he's the only one. Keep going, even when they stop listening, especially then. That's where the work begins, and sometimes that's where the real leadership shows up, quiet, steady, and impossible to erase. Just like you. Malcolm Reeves.